Thanks for joining, ladies and gents. I appreciate you guys being on once again. I interviewed the man Kaush Nanubhai today. Some of you may have heard of Kaush. He is a full-time real estate investor, also a CPA. So he was describing his story about how he started as someone who worked at a golf course when he was younger. And one of the people, a wealthy person that was attending the golf course, suggested that he should either become an accountant or a lawyer. And he took their advice to heart and decided to become a CPA. From there, he realized that what he was doing wasn't going to help him and his family. It wasn't really doing much for his wealth. So he focused on real estate investing. And we discussed how basically the birth of his daughter and son made him really want to go down that path of investing in real estate. In 2019, he was able to retire from his job and rely solely on the income that his properties were producing. So we talked about that journey. We also talked about his recent infill development. So he had a property in St. Catharines that he actually severed and used a prefabricated home or a modular home. He talked about that process. So I think you guys are going to get some good value out of this. And as a reminder, I just want to share with you guys that I am currently working on a few off-market properties in Welland and St. Catharines. So if you have any interest in finding out more, I'd love to see if there's a way for me to help you and help you build your wealth through real estate. I know that a lot of people are sometimes afraid to move forward for whatever reason. If you find that you are unsure about what to do, reach out to me. Go to welloff.ca, book a call with me. I'm happy to discuss. And also, if you would like to pick up some free reports, just go to welloff.ca/report. There's a bunch of good information in there for you. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Welloff Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. Today, I'm here with Kaush Nanubhai, who is a full-time real estate investor now, actually. So just a little bit of background on Kaush. He spent the first 7 years of his corporate career as a finance professional. He is a CPA, or a former CPA, and he realized at some point that he didn't have a solid plan for his family's financial future, so he decided he wanted to start focusing on real estate investing. He spent the next 5 years after that point building a real estate portfolio of 11 properties, and in 2019, so last year, at the age of 42, he was able to replace his income and leave his role as a recruiter to become a full-time real estate investor. Some of his recent projects include an infill development project to build a purpose-built duplex using a modular building, so a prefabricated building, and we're going to talk about that. So Kaush, welcome. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks, George. One correction, I still am a CPA.
Still, okay. Fair enough.
Not a former CPA.
Yeah, not a former. Maybe you don't practice as much.
Yeah, exactly. I understand what you're saying. But,
yeah. So these intros aren't perfect.
I worked hard for that, so I want to
Got it. All right, we'll give you credit for that.
Yeah.
Okay, Coach. So the way I like to start off, I like to ask about your childhood. So I want to know a little bit about where you grew up and maybe one or two things you remember from that time.
Sure. So I grew up in North York, kind of the Jane and Shepherd area, which is close to not the greatest area, but close to Jane and Finch. But I know there's a lot of kind of images come up when you hear Jane and Finch and so forth. But to me, it was just life, right? Like I didn't know it was a good area, bad area. I just grew up there, right? So, it was. I had a great group of friends. Some memories would be, playing soccer, ball hockey. I was really involved in the martial arts growing up as well, mainly Jiu-Jitsu.
Cool.
It was a great time, and a good group of friends. So, yeah.
Was Jiu-Jitsu popular when you were growing up? It seems like it was.
UFC just started. So it just started becoming popular.
Yeah.
The style of Jiu-Jitsu that I learned was more stand-up, kind of more versus ground fighting. It was more stand-up, multiple attackers, because we learned, my instructor was more of he was an ETF officer. So he was kind of teaching us the practical stuff they would use on the street, like when multiple attackers and so forth, right? So yeah,
cool. I always thought that jiu-jitsu was like on the ground. I didn't realize that there's
originally it was more I believe it was more kind of stand-up, right? Fighting with swords and so forth, and back in Japan and so forth. And then I believe one of the masters or so forth went to Brazil. I guess, Gracie's and other families kind of modified it as well. I believe that's the history. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Became more, Yeah.
Yeah, and now a lot of people associate jiu-jitsu with Brazil because there's so many good good people that come out of there.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I never really thought about the history and how it's probably Asian because of the name, jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, Japan.
And how did that end up being a big thing in Brazil? It's interesting. I have to do some research and figure that out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So did you ever put your jiu-jitsu to use? Were you ever competing in tournaments or anything?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. We did enter some tournaments. So all of the group of guys that I grew up with, we were all involved in it. So yeah.
Cool.
Actually, I mean, it's funny. I mean, we'll talk about me becoming an accountant in the future, later on in the podcast. But I always joke that while growing up, some of my friends continued with martial arts, and one of them actually fought in the UFC, became very popular in the UFC. And so I always joke that, I became an accountant, he became a UFC fighter. So.
Nice. Well, what's your friend's name, if you can share?
Carlos Newton, yeah.
Carlos Newton. Is he...
he was one of the original, first Canadian title holder, I believe.
Was it? What was his weight class?
I think he was lightweight.
Lightweight. I remember the name, but he must have fought a long time ago. I know he hasn't fought in the last 10 years.
I'm getting old.
Okay, well, that's cool. That's interesting. Yeah, so was his style primarily jiu-jitsu? Like he was a grappler?
Well, he definitely was initially jiu-jitsu, but then he's the kind of guy who would pick up things from all different styles. So he'd go train in Muay Thai kickboxing or different types of styles, and he'd pick up what worked for him, right? And then he'd apply that, right? So,
well, that's necessary today. There's no one in the UFC today that only knows how to do one thing. Everyone pretty much knows how to do everything. Maybe they're not great at everything, but they can get by for the most part. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
it's always interesting. Did you ever do any striking? Like, did you ever take any boxing classes or Muay Thai or any of that?
No. Like I said, I started at a certain point. I started focusing on my career, and I made it all the way up to like brown belt, black stripe, but I actually didn't get my black belt. That's one of my bucket list items, to kind of go back and maybe get the black belt one day. So
cool. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Good for you. So tell us then, how did you end up going from martial arts to accounting? What was that journey?
Well, actually, growing up, funny enough, I used to work at a golf course. So I worked there for 10 summers, and it had a really big impact on me. It's funny. It was called Oakdale Golf and Country Club, and it was just located across the street. So I used to be able to cross the street, hop the fence, and I'm in the golf course walking to work.
Nice.
So basically, it was some of Toronto's top business people. As I mentioned to you earlier, it was mainly a Jewish golf course, so the membership was primarily of the Jewish background.
Yeah.
So I used to, since my name's Kaush, I used to explain my name as kosher without the because Jewish people eat kosher food, and they'd never forget my name. So it was pretty cool. So I had a really good opportunity there, and I'm grateful for that opportunity to be around so many successful people, and again, some of Toronto's top business people, including in the real estate space. A lot of developers like the Menkes family, they were members there. The owner of Tribute Homes, the CEO of RioCan. So just a number of very good people. I didn't know who they were at the time, but I just tried to give good service, and I did a number of jobs there. I started out as a caddy, so I used to carry two golf bags.
Yeah.
And back in the day, those bags, they're like the thick leather straps. So I used to carry them for about 4 hours, and I used to get $40. And I used to get a hot dog and a pop after 9 holes, so after 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's what I started doing. And I used to come home sometimes with like bruises on my shoulder, but it was fun though. Like I enjoyed, having the ability to make some money, right? And also to interact. So and then I moved into the back shop, which cleaning the clubs, parking carts, so forth. And then I moved into the play coordinator or starter role. And that was really cool because I got to interact with a lot of the membership that way in a more intimate level, and I had control over their time, right? So they wanted to get to know me too, right? Because I could make them have a good day or a bad day depending on who I put in front of them or behind them or that type of thing, right? So, but it was really cool because I had to negotiate with them sometimes. Hey, let me put this person, I'll get you next time, or like slip this person in front of you, do this, that type of thing. Or I used to gently have to nudge them to move quicker, and stop talking and let's get to the tee. So it was really cool. I got to know the membership really well, and yeah, that was a really cool opportunity for growing up where I did. It was like a paradise in the middle of the ghetto, right? So it was somewhere where I spent a lot of time growing up. And so kind of the reason I'm kind of bringing this up is one day I was sitting down with one of the members, and I told him I wanted to be in business. And I asked him, what do you suggest? What should I do? And he said to me, be a lawyer or an accountant. Because he said every business transaction needs one.
Yeah.
So I picked accountant. And the other thing, which was really cool, is when I told the membership told some of the members that I wanted to be an accountant, be a chartered accountant, they were just really supportive and happy and started making phone calls for me, started writing recommendation letters. It was really, really cool. Like, they didn't get me the job. I had to have the marks to get the job, a job, but in the chartered accounting world. But, obviously having their recommendations helped, right? Yeah. So it was really cool. And I just really grateful for that opportunity. And I think that, with that, I guess just that Jewish community, when they see that you work hard and they respect hard work and they support you, it was really cool. Yeah. So it was nice.
I've heard that before too.
And they support each other. There's a lot of learning from kind of being around that culture growing up.
Definitely. And that sounds like a pretty cool job. You were getting paid about $10 an hour with the lunch.
That was initially. Then I kind of went on payroll, right? And I did those other jobs. Yeah,
that's pretty cool for a kid to have that.
I got to play on the golf course too, like after hours, after work, and but I would, I'd be kind of playing sometimes, but going to my martial arts classes or doing other things at other times.
You must have been in pretty good shape at that time.
Yeah, at that time, for sure.
Like carrying those bags for 4 hours and playing and then martial arts, so that's good.
Yeah, very active growing up, for sure.
Yeah. So you did your accounting gig for a while.
Yep. So I articled with PricewaterhouseCoopers, so one of the big accounting firms. So it was a great experience. I got the opportunity to see a different business every month, basically, right? Go in, learn about their business, understand their numbers, make sure it makes sense. So I was an auditor, right? But I didn't love auditing. You always kind of looking at something from a negative point of view, like what are they doing wrong, like being skeptical of people and so forth. And I was more of an upbeat kind of, like, I wanted to see the glass half full kind of guy, right? I decided I enjoyed the numbers. I enjoyed the camaraderie at the firm. I enjoyed, interacting with clients, but I just didn't love auditing. So I decided to try doing finance within companies. So I worked for Advanced Micro Devices. It was called ATI Technologies, and they were acquired by Advanced Micro Devices, and then Home Depot. And, I enjoyed using the numbers in a different way, but it was more of a desk job. And I kind of like that kind of going out, meeting clients, that type of thing, right? So when I was looking for a new role, the recruiting firm that I was helping me look for a new role said, hey, you're an accountant, you have a personality, like, why don't you join us, right? And it was a kind of really tough decision because you work so hard to get your CA, to be established in the accounting world, and you're like, being a recruiter doesn't necessarily have the same, you don't have to like have this education and so forth, right? So it was a tough decision, but I kind of went back to what that member told me, and I thought to myself, I wanted to be in the business world. I didn't necessarily want to be an accountant, right? So I thought to myself, okay, if I do this, I would probably, because I was recruiting accounting finance professionals, I could still use my finance experience and network, right? But I could use it in a different way, right? And I could basically learn new skills like sales, marketing, business development at the same time. And worst case scenario, if I didn't like doing it, I would know where all the best jobs were, right? So I decided to take the plunge, and I switched from being an accountant to being an executive recruiter. And I started off with, a more larger kind of firm that gave you a lot of training and so forth. And then I moved to a boutique firm by the end of my my time as an executive recruiter, as a partner. Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you try different things, accounting and then recruiting. And then at what point in your life did you decide, I know we kind of touched on it in the intro, but at what point did you say, I want real estate to be a part of my life?
Yeah. So funny enough, so I moved, remember I mentioned I moved from the larger firm to a more boutique firm.
When was that, by the way?
That was about 2012, right when my daughter was born.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And, now I had 2 children. I have a son and I have a daughter. And he was 2010, she was 2012. And I was thinking to myself, wow, now we got to really start thinking about the future, right? Like, I started right after my son too, but like more when you had 2, right? So I was thinking, and I was placing people in job opportunities that, where there were pensions, where there were retirement programs and so forth, right? And I was like, oh, what's my program? Because remember, I not only moved from accounting to executive recruitment, I moved from salary, benefits, so forth, to commission fully, cold calling, which I've never done in my life before, and trying to get out of my accounting shell to become a better rounded business professional. Right?
Yeah.
So that's when I started thinking about it. It's like, okay, my family's future. What do we got here? So I started investigating different wealth building strategies, and I stumbled upon REIN, right? And I went to my first acre in 2013, and that was probably the turning point for me. Like, where I always knew real estate was, obviously being at the golf course, seeing some of the membership and seeing, but I also, and funny enough, when I used to go audit companies, I used to see some of my I audited some real estate companies. I'd see the members' names like on the documents, the minutes, and so forth. So it's like I always kind of in my mind knew real estate was a great way to build wealth, or wealthy people had real estate, but I never realized why, right? And when I went there and I learned about leverage, I learned about demographics and GDP growth and limited supply. I was like, wow, this makes total sense. Why didn't I do this sooner, right? Actually, funny enough, I did have an opportunity to do it sooner. So in about 2008, this is a funny story. It kind of circles back to where I am now. But I had the opportunity. I sat down with someone across from, had a coffee, was introduced to someone, and they pitched a joint venture opportunity to me.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, this is okay, interesting. But then I was like, okay, so I'm going to put up all the money, you're going to do the work, and you're going to get half?
Yeah.
Shouldn't you put up half the money? The common right? And at that time, I was like, I'm going to do it myself. Funny thing is, 5 years went by, I didn't do anything.
Right.
If I had actually listened to that guy, I would have learned, my learning would have been a lot sooner, and my wealth building would have been a lot sooner.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's going back. So that's 2008. But going back to REIN, that's where I learned kind of the basis. I established my network, right? Funny enough, I didn't buy anything in the first year, though. I just educated, got comfortable, networked. But then slowly, you'd go to the meetings, you'd see you're sitting beside people who they weren't as educated as me. They weren't, as smart as me maybe, or they just took action, right? And they just followed an approach, and they just took action. And I was like, why am I not doing? Why haven't I done this sooner? Why am I not doing it yet? Right? So, I suffer being an accountant. I suffered some analysis paralysis, right? So, but I finally pulled the trigger like about a year later, so 2014, and for about 5 years, I bought 2 to 3 properties a year. 2019 is when I, was able to feel confident that I've replaced, my income on an after-tax basis. I would take the plunge. And that wasn't easy either. Again, being a conservative accountant, having 2 kids at home. I mean, I have, cash flow from my portfolio, which is strong. But just taking that plunge was challenging too. But again, I thought back, there was one question actually when I was moving from accounting world to the recruitment world. One of the questions the interviewer asked me was, what are some of the best jobs you've had, or the elements of jobs that you've had that you enjoyed the most? And one was actually as I mentioned, working at PwC, I enjoyed the collegial environment. I enjoyed servicing clients, heading to different companies. I also enjoyed working at the golf course, where I was a play coordinator. I was on the phone, and that's what helped me switch to recruiting. But it also helped me switch to real estate, because I was thinking to myself, what do I enjoy the most about? I enjoyed about recruiting is the interaction with people, but it didn't have the same numbers element that I enjoyed. Right. So when you put those two together, you get real estate. Right. You get numbers, you get interaction with trades, you get interaction with realtors, you get interaction with mortgage brokers, you know what I mean? So it helped me solidify that this was the right path, plus the financial freedom, the opportunity to be creative and so forth. So it's kind of like, again, another no-brainer. Like, what are you waiting for? Just do it. You know what I mean?
It was right. So, it was the right decision for you.
Exactly, yeah.
So along the way, let's say in 2014, you bought your first one. You said you were buying 2 to 3 per year after that.
Yeah.
Were you leveraging those properties? Were you refinancing them or getting home equity lines of credits on the investment properties? Or were you just kind of using your savings?
So back in... I did one good thing. Back in 2003, I bought a condo. And I bought it not as a real estate investment, more to live in after I got married.
Okay.
But I also bought it because I was spending like $200-300 every weekend, every night, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, going out drinking because I had money. I was living at home. I was... I was like, man, I need to buy something to force me to save, right? So, and plus I was, going to get engaged and live, wanted to somewhere to live with my wife afterwards, right? So, so basically I bought that condo. My wife and I had the house, had a house in Oakville. And we re-leveraged those two initially to get started. Yeah. And then, luckily the prices in Oakville kind of continued to go up. And every year every time I could see like at least $100K in appreciation, I would refinance and pull that money out and grow. And then you know what happens, right? Then you leverage, you have 1, 2, 3, say from your initial primary residence over time, then those start to appreciate, then you re-leverage those, right? So that's kind of how I grew the portfolio.
Cool.
So the condo and the house, and then re-leveraging those, right?
Yeah. And at what point did you feel, I mean, not that you have to share the exact numbers, but what was your process for identifying that you had enough cash flow to no longer work? Was it based on a certain number that you needed to pay off your personal monthly, whatever? Like what?
So my wife still works, right? So the way that we, it was roughly a number. Like it was like, I want to be in a similar after-tax place, right? And when you're looking at, like, I pull dividend income out of my corp, so that's kind of taxed at a lower rate than I would have been taxed
from your holding company.
Yeah, from my active company. So I have a holding company, and I have a company that charges property management fees to that, right? So
okay, cool.
And then I pull money out of that active company, right? Yeah. So when you compare the after tax kind of in your pocket money is where I want it to be in a similar place,
right?
So my wife, the way we structure it is my wife's income covers our household expenses, and I cover everything else, like my kids' hockey activities, my our vacations, and so forth. Right. So we do all the other things, and her stuff takes care of our basic needs.
That's awesome. That's exactly what my wife to be and I are discussing. We're talking about her doing the personal payments for whatever we need, and then I would just continue to build wealth and acquire properties and go down that path. But that's interesting what you're saying about the holdco and the active corporation that you have. So the active one has basically just your property management company in there?
Property and project. So like with my most recent development project, I would charge project management fees as well.
Right.
But property and project, and consulting. Like I'm starting to, when people ask for advice, per hour rate, that type of thing, some consulting in there as well.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And your property management, is that just for your properties, or are you managing other people's properties as well?
Just mine as well as my JV partners. So I have 3 JV partners in as well currently. And I have, like I said, I have 2 earlier to you. I have 2 waiting right now. So over time, as people have seen what I've done, the fact that I'm no longer working, that I'm legitimate, you know what I mean? Like I'm not doing something funny, right? They're like, wow, this stuff does work, and can you work with us? And what I tell people is, look, you don't have to work with me for everything, right? Like do the first one and learn. Like like I give them that example I shared with you. Just do one, learn from it, see what I have to do, and see if you want to do that. And then if you do, then just go ahead with the next ones on your own. Like if you want to go to networking sessions, you want to read the books, you go ahead and do that. But if you want to become a doctor, go become a doctor. But if you want to get healed, just go to the doctor and get, you know what I mean? Right. Yeah. So, when I actually calculate back how much time I've spent reading, how much time I've spent going to networking events, how much time I've spent networking, developing relationships, it's equivalent to a 4-year, more than a 4-year, almost a university degree, right? Sure. Like there's a lot of times. It was over 500 hours, I think, at one point when I calculated a couple of years ago. So, it doesn't come for free, right? So,
and it's ongoing. You're still learning. You're still,
and I like to teach. I like to share strategies and so forth. It helps me mirror my CA background, and I had a minor in personal finance growing up, and going through university. So I really enjoy kind of helping people structure their finances as well, right? Like,
cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to go back to that thing with the active property management, whatever else. With your property management, are you finding the tenants as well, or are you outsourcing that part?
I mostly find them, but from time to time I'll outsource it.
Okay. And are you doing that all on your own, or do you have staff that's helping?
I just do that on my own.
So you're doing all the property management. Any tenant inquiries, they all come to you.
They all come to me. I mean, I have a really great resource out in kind of the area where my properties are, like a handyman, and I have developed, the trades that I use and so forth. So, the process is, I don't have a website kind of set up where they have to log a maintenance request or anything like that at this point. But the process is pretty simple. I tell them, send me a text, send me pictures. I take a copy of that text. I send it to my handyman. He goes out, fixes it, bills me, and I pay him.
Cool.
That's kind of how it works. Yeah.
Do you know Casey Wong?
I do. Yeah.
So Casey was on the podcast a little while ago, and he was saying he manages over 200 doors himself, and it's the same exact procedure. He doesn't have anything fancy. He gets the tenants to text or email a photo of the problem, sends the person out, deals with it, gets billed, and that's it.
Yeah.
So if it works for 200 units, then why do we, if we have less than that, why do we have to get fancy and create all these crazy systems, right?
Right. But don't get me wrong, I do want to like transition that out probably in the next year or so. So that I could just purely focus on finding opportunities with partners and so forth. And
you mean delegating the property management? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So I don't want to be active doing that forever, right? It's just through the transition phase, I have to pay myself too, right? So, but what I have to do is get the buffer of projects in the hopper before I kind of transition that out. So that's kind of what I'm working on next,
So do you build your property management fees into the joint venture agreement? Like you sell it as part of the deal, like, hey, we're going to do this deal and my property management company is going to bill X dollars, X percent per month. And this is like, if you want to work with me, that's how it is. Is that kind of what
I mean, basically, I think having I've never had a situation where a JV partner didn't want me to because I have a vested interest in the property, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But I tell them, look, I tell them this is kind of the standard fee, right? I also, in my JVs, I help them understand like where to get the money from. Like, if you have money, you don't necessarily take the money from say an investment account and then automatically invest it in real estate, right? Like you basically pay down your mortgage first, create the room in a credit line, and then use that money, right? So I always make them use borrowed money. So I let them write off their interest on their borrowed money, and I take a property management fee. But I'm fine if at some point somebody else manages it too. But that number has to be budgeted in there because that's a realistic cost of doing business, right?
That's right.
So, yeah.
Cool. And I know you're not an accountant, so
I am an accountant.
Wait, what am
I don't
saying?
do accounting anymore, though. Yeah,
You are an accountant.
I
so
am
you're
an
the
accountant by trade, by kind of profession.
Yeah,
but,
so I can ask you accounting questions.
But I don't remember all the, especially tax. Like I audited, I did my tax hours, but everybody thinks accountants know tax inside out. But
okay, well, I'm not going to ask you like a very specific tax question, but what I was going to say is, was there like a certain number that of property management income that you thought made sense for you to incorporate under that, like to have an active corporation, or did you just do it right from the beginning?
So that year that I kind of didn't, after I kind of attended REIN, I didn't do anything. I kind of researched kind of how am I going to structure everything, and I got some advice on setting up the 3-tier corporation and so forth, right? So that's kind of when I did it, right? So I did it before I started buying. So it wasn't like a certain amount of income or anything. It was just like, okay, this kind of, to me, it made sense, because if you have a holding company that's generating income, and you have another company that's charging that company, that's reducing the income here, reducing the tax rate in the holding company, and that active income is being taxed because it's active income, not passive income, at a lower rate.
Yeah.
So it just kind of made sense to me.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. As long as there is enough cash flow, I guess.
Yeah. So like the holding company is like, say, 40, and the passive company is 20, right? So roughly.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, as long as there's enough monthly cash flow in your your properties, because if you're going into the negatives, I don't know if that really makes sense.
I never buy properties that don't cash flow. It's just like I've never done that. So yeah,
right. Factoring in the property management as part of your
100%,
due diligence. Yeah,
like there has to be positive cash flow, or you don't buy.
Yeah,
like we don't buy even with a JV partner.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So, are there any other? Well, first of all, we didn't even talk about the kinds of properties you're buying.
Sure.
So what is it like? Did you start always buying the same type of property, or did your strategy change over time?
It changed over time. So I mean, I've done single families. Like as I mentioned, I had a condo back when I initially started working. I started with student rentals, and then I moved into duplexes, and after that, moved into development, infill development. Right.
So let's talk about that. I do like that infill development project that I've seen you speak at Durham REI, and you were talking about that. So you were, you had this property, from what I remember, and it was sitting on a big lot. So I believe you severed the lot,
correct,
and then you looked into a prefabricated home. So one that's pretty much built in a factory, and then the foundation's poured, and they bring in the house and piece it together on site. Right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Pretty much described it. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you even think about that? Like, did somebody give you that idea, or were you just
I mean, at the end of the day, I was in Quentin D'Souza's Action Taker program, and he actually did a modular build 1 year before I did.
Okay.
And I actually went out to see the build, and I discussed kind of doing something similar. Like, he knew that I had the land and I was going to build as well, and I introduced me to his contacts and so forth, and kind of went from there.
Oh, cool.
So he was actually the first one who did that, and and I at the time I had a number of challenges with some trades and so forth, and I was thinking to myself, if I could get this built off-site, structurally it's actually a bit stronger than stick build, because it has to be hoisted on a crane and so forth. It's in a temperature controlled environment. It's fast, right? Like we had the house up with at about 70% complete, airtight within the day, but within 2 days with the exterior installation.
Yeah. So you're saying after the foundation was poured and all of that?
Yeah, after all that was done, on delivery of the house.
On delivery, yeah.
Like, it was airtight within the day, but like final touches by the day 2.
Right. That's awesome.
Right.
So what are some of the advantages of doing it that way? I can imagine that one of them might be with timing, because while you're maybe getting approval from the city or like finalizing all of that, you could have the factory begin construction.
For sure. Yeah. While you're like, the way that I describe it is, in a traditional build, you work consecutively. Like you have to get the permit, put the foundation, start building on the framing and so forth. Whereas in a modular building process, you can work concurrently, right? You can have the house being built while you're pouring the foundation, for example.
Right.
So that was, definitely timing is a benefit. Speed. You should be able to cut the build time down in half at least.
And is it cheaper too to do it that way?
It's about the same.
About the same.
I don't think it's matured to the point where the cost savings are strong. But I wanted to try it because I just wanted to do something different. And if I do something down the road on a larger scale, in my mind I was thinking, like, in development, it's kind of like recruiting. And recruiting, the way that you make the most money is by placing as many people as you can within the year. It's like real estate, selling as many houses as you can, right? Yeah. Same thing with development. Like, if you're going to maximize your potential in development, you got to build as quickly as you can within the year, right? So being a process that should cut down the speed, I wanted to try it, right?
Yeah, it helps you create a system around it and
exactly.
a system that's efficient as possible.
Right, and you don't necessarily have to deal with all the trades. A lot of the inspections are done in the factory. Like there's a certification program. So, like, for example, the framing, the interior installation and exterior installation were all kind of passed in the factory. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. No, there's some advantages. I mean, there's some disadvantages too.
Yeah, I was going to ask what are some of the disadvantages?
So, there are some design limitations. And a lot of the modular builders, like, for example, with this purpose-built duplex, they don't like tweaking their designs, or they haven't thought of, okay, this guy, like, let's put our vents in this way so that it doesn't create too many penetrations through the two different, like, they weren't even thinking that I'd have a basement apartment. You know what I mean? They wouldn't. So their designs are not, you have to spend more time. I guess if I could give one piece of advice, if someone's trying this, they want to build a purpose, spend a lot of time on the design phase and understand that you're not in Part 11 of the code, which is kind of, I believe, is existing properties. You're in Part 9, which is a lot more involved. So you have to do a lot more fire caulking. The natural light requirements are different. You have to put in dampers in the vents and so forth. So it's a lot more complicated. And if you could design the modular build with that in mind, and the company that you're working with is open to that, then it would be a lot more beneficial for sure. Yeah.
Did you have a designer working or an architect working with you?
Well, so we had a preliminary design, and we provided that to the builder, and they have their own BCN people that would put it together because it has to be, you have to make sure that it works within the modules, right? So how many modules you have and where the walls would be and so forth. So we had our preliminary, we gave it to them. They came back with their plan based on what they could do with modular. Luckily, it was a square, so it wasn't really, a difficult. Yeah. Didn't have arches and things like that, right? Yeah. And my roof was actually something that I had to change. So because I didn't want it built on site, I wanted it built at the factory. So just a quick, so it was like a hip roof, which kind of goes like this and then like this. Yeah. And so they can't do that in the factory. They can provide the materials when they do deliver the modules. Yeah. But I had to go back and kind of get it designed as a flat roof. That was something that was suggested. So the roof was kind of on top of the top modules. And then right before they lifted it, they brought it together and then they connected it after. So you didn't have to have framers on site kind of framing the roof, right? So
yeah, it was all done.
So these are, I was able to catch some design things, but there's a lot more design things that could be implemented. Sure. But I realized, look, if you want to be in development, you got to do it, right? And you're going to make mistakes, and the first one's not going to be the most profitable one, but you got to get in the game at the end of the day. So
did you decide that you want to focus more on infills moving forward?
You know what? I wanted to add that tool to my toolkit. if I find another property that's on a large lot, I'm going to sever it. Maybe I'll build on it. Maybe I'll sell the lot. I wanted to add that to my toolkit, right? I also want to buy a building, right? I was talking to you earlier. That's kind of one of the things I want to add to my toolkit. I want to be able to see any real estate opportunity and be able to understand it and how I can optimize it, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of Quentin's idea. Yeah. He'd always say that. What's the highest and best use? What can you do to this property? Exactly. How can you add value? He's always talking about
plan
that.
B, plan C, plan D.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing I was going to ask you about, so with these prefab homes, do they come in pieces? So like, let's say a home is split in 4 and it comes in 4 different chunks?
Yes, exactly. So our house had basically 4 Lego blocks. It was an 1,800 square foot house, 2 on the bottom, 2 go on top of that. The roof was on the 2 top ones. Yeah.
Okay, so would some of the limitations here potentially that be that there's going to be a wall in the middle of the house that can't be opened because it's...
Well, you incorporate that into the design, right?
Yeah.
So wherever the walls are, you would kind of incorporate that into the design.
So do you have an opening between the walls? Like say you have like the living room on the right side and the kitchen on the left side. Would there be an opening between them or is the wall sealed?
I have a staircase in the middle actually. So
you have a staircase in the middle?
Yeah.
So how did they chunk that off in 4 then?
Yeah. So, well, basically the staircase, the top half of the staircase is part of the upper modules. Okay. And then the staircase itself is one unit that was in one of the modules, but it's not that they gave me 2 staircases. You know what I mean?
So the staircase isn't on like in the middle of the house, right in the middle between the left and the right side. It's kind of leaning towards either the right or the left side.
Yeah. So like basically one module was kind of like this, right? And then the 2 modules on the bottom, right? Their staircase was in the middle.
Yeah.
So like one module here. So I had a staircase going up like this.
Yep.
And then on top of that, I had 2 other modules.
Okay.
So like my kind of wall was like a staircase wall.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it was a good way to use that space and the limitations.
You incorporate it into the design. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's great. Was there anything else you wanted to add on this whole infill stuff?
No, I mean, other applications, definitely if you're looking at cottage property or, where somewhere else where it's hard to get trades, I mean, that's where the common uses are.
Yeah.
I think it's more coming mainstream now. I know Manamy's done some modular builds. I know other people are looking at modular, right? So, but, it's a good tool to have in your toolkit. I think the other application would be, with third units coming online, you could... It's easier to, in a way, bring one unit over a house and drop it on, your foundation or your kind of base.
Are you talking about coach houses?
Exactly.
That kind of thing?
Yeah.
That's what I figured would be an awesome
as well.
I figured
so.
That's
another reason I wanted to kind of do it too, is to kind of understand how that application would work, right?
Do you know what cities are allowing these? I know they're always changing the rules and whatever. Do you know if like Hamilton, Brantford?
I know that
I'm talking about coach houses, by the way.
Yeah, Kitchener and Welland are open to them.
Cool.
I know that more and more cities are reviewing the new kind of legislation that came down, seeing how to incorporate it, right? So.
What kind of fees did you have to incur for this whole infill development thing that you went through in Welland? Was it Welland?
No, it was in St. Catharines.
Sorry, St. Catharines, yeah.
Oh, well, you have to go through the severance process. I actually had to go through the severance process. So that's, hiring a consultant, right? Consulting on design, talking to the planners, going to the committee of adjustments meetings and so forth. So, I mean, that was probably, I don't know, upwards of $30,000 to $40,000, including the fees to actually sever, right? Not just kind of the and so forth. And then the design portion of the build and the actual putting a deposit for the structure, right? So and the surveyors, getting the water lines put in by the city, that was 10 G's. There's
all these developer fees.
There's all these fees come, especially when after you actually get the severance, it's conditional upon this fee, that fee,
fee,
tree development fund fee, and 5% of the appraised value of the land fee. Like it's there's tons of fees. It's everybody puts their hand out once they see that you have something, right? So
were you able to get like construction financing of some sort to do this?
So I had a private lender.
Okay.
So I had a private lender for probably half the cost, just a bit more than half the cost, and then I funded the other half myself.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
I didn't want to go through all the paperwork, and I had someone who was interested in supporting the project that I knew very, very well, and so.
Well, I mean, private, it probably works out because you're adding so much value, and I'm assuming you refinanced after.
I'm in the process right now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so let's jump into the next section, which is the random 5. I'm going to ask you 5 random questions, and you just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. What's the closest thing to magic that actually exists?
I don't know. Hypnosis? I don't know.
Okay. That's a good answer. What do you strongly suspect but have no proof of?
UFOs? I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
It's very good chance there's something out there.
First thing that comes to mind.
Yeah. What event would you like to know the whole and complete truth about?
JFK assassination.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Because nobody really knows, right?
Theories,
yeah. Nobody knows that guy. Did he die recently? Like last year or 2 years ago or something?
Lee Harvey Oswald? I don't know.
I think he was in prison, and then I don't know. That is an interesting thing to know. What's the oldest thing you own?
I don't know. I used to have this hoodie that was like really torn up, but I loved it. It was so comfortable, and then my wife threw it away. That was probably the oldest thing. She didn't like it anymore. So,
I don't know why wives do that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
she's looking out for you.
Wants you to look good.
Yeah. Okay. And what success principle do you live by?
Good one. I think it's probably like it's only failure when you don't learn from it, right? Or learn from your mistakes, right? I think that's important, and don't be afraid to make them, because that's how learning happens. Live each day to your fullest, and just be genuine. I think is just be real, and that's kind of what I live by.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And it seems like you have a pretty optimistic outlook. Like you seem like a pretty positive person, so I think that helps too.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. All right. So do you want to tell people how they can reach you and what services you offer?
So I don't really have a website or anything. I mean, I can provide my email in the show notes, but
sure.
Basically, I'm at the point where to buy real estate, you need money, time, and experience, right? So I have the time and experience now, and I'm looking, for people who, want to invest the money, right? Mm-hmm. So that I'm looking for JV opportunities, or opportunities to lend secured against real estate. If someone wants to lend money and they don't want to take the equity interest, that's fine too. And if anyone's just interested in learning how to develop a portfolio, I don't have a formal coaching program or anything at the time, but I'm happy to do something on a per hour basis. If things, if that way, like if you find what I'm telling you useful, you continue. If not, you don't have to pay like $5,000 or something like that. Right. So
cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
Pretty simple.
I'll be sure to include your information in the show notes. This was great. Is there anything, any final messages or anything you want to leave our audience with?
I think the one thing I would just say is for people who aren't sure about investing in real estate and, are kind of hesitant, or just don't get focused on buying 10, right? Just get that first one. Because that first one is going to help you buy your third one or fourth one, right? And the last thing I'd say is a lot of people are saying, "Oh no, about home equity." People are hesitant about using their home equity, and that's kind of how I grew my whole portfolio. Right? And I would say to them is, look, the home equity in your house, it's already invested in real estate. It's just not doing anything for you.
Yeah.
So why not take it from real estate and put it in real estate, same asset class. You're not putting it in risky stocks, and let it do something for you.
What's the point of having the home equity line of credit if you're not planning on using it for
Well, people
anything.
don't even have that home.
Yeah.
I help people. I go advise them to go put that in place right away when I start working with them, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I didn't know that you could do this. I didn't know you could." So it's like, I just understanding leverage is important.
Yeah, and it's understandable that people don't want to put their personal homes on the line.
For sure.
It's understandable. It's not for everyone, but if you are willing to, I think they're like you've experienced it. You can grow quite a bit using what's available to you.
At the end of the day, if you're buying, you're not really, in my mind, you're not really putting your home on the line, right?
Yeah.
Like you're using the equity to buy another home that's cash flowing, and you're writing off the interest against that.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're not really. It's really a paper shuffle that allows you to maximize your wealth. Right.
Yeah.
So
I think it's kind of that old idea that you should just pay off your home.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
save your
Trust
money.
Me, I
pay
grew
it
up
off.
with that. So
exactly.
But it took me a lot because I was raised very conservatively. My parents were first generation immigrants to Canada, and saving and conserving and not spending and overspending was in my mind a lot, and I had to really break that shell. Even when I was switching jobs from something that was like salaried to fully commissioned or
I bet they thought you were crazy.
Yeah, like why are you doing this? So you have to get uncomfortable sometimes to grow, right? And so strategically, I've tried to do that, but I'm still conservative. But I'm trying my best to make strategic, uncomfortable decisions. To grow. So
for sure, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share your story.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate
anytime. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to get some good value out of it.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. And I look forward to chatting again soon.
Okay. Thanks, George.
Thanks once again for listening to another episode of the Well Off Podcast. Just want to remind you that if you do appreciate the content, all I ask is that you comment, maybe like it if you can on the platform that you're listening to it on, and finally share it with friends and family. I'd love to get the message out there, and it would mean a lot if you can share it. And finally, I just wanted to offer you, as a valued listener, a free copy to the Roadmap to Real Estate Investing, which is a document that I've put together which helps you identify what strategy would best suit your needs at this current time. You go over certain things that are included in this document step by step, and it'll hopefully provide you with some clarity. So have a look. You can go to www.welloff.ca/guide to download your free copy.